Princess Liara of the Valorian Empire walked through the tall marble halls of the Royal Archive. Her long silver cloak swept across the polished floors as she moved past glowing pillars of crystal light. Behind her trailed two advisors, both carrying tablets filled with data. Liara was young, confident, and proud. She was heir to one of the greatest empires in the galaxy, and she had never known defeat. Her people, the Valorians, had ruled dozens of star systems for centuries. Their fleets were fast, their armies strong, and their power unquestioned. To her, there was no challenge in the galaxy they could not overcome. Yet in the deepest parts of the archive, she found records that always made her laugh. They were old, older than her empire itself. Fragments of text, faded images, and half-broken transmissions told the same story again and again. They spoke of a species called humans. According to the legends, these humans were warriors unlike any other, small in number, fragile compared to other races, yet terrifying in battle. The records claimed they fought enemies far stronger than themselves, and still emerged victorious. To Liara, it was foolish nonsense. She stepped before a tall display of holographic symbols, the words glowing softly in the dim chamber. One of her advisors began to read the old lines aloud. "Beware the humans, for they fight not for empire or conquest, but because they refuse to kneel. They turn desperation into victory, and their enemies into ash." Liara's lips curved into a smile. "Do you truly expect me to believe this?" she asked. "A species so mighty yet nowhere to be found today? If humans were real, they would be rulers of the stars, and yet we see nothing." Her advisor bowed his head. "Princess, many empires speak of them. Even our rivals, the Drakthar, keep old warnings in their archives." "All myths," Liara said, waving her hand. "Children's stories to frighten younglings. Humans never existed, and if they did, they were not as powerful as these tales claim." Still, as she turned away from the glowing words, she felt a flicker of curiosity. Why did so many different species, separated by thousands of years, record the same warnings? How could so many empires tell the same story of human warriors if it was only legend? That night, in the high palace overlooking the twin suns of Vylor Prime, Liara sat by the balcony and thought of the stories again. She remembered the way the advisors spoke in hushed voices, as if even saying the word human carried weight. Her maidservant, noticing her silence, asked softly, "Does something trouble you, princess?" Liara shook her head. "Only silly thoughts. The archives are filled with old fantasies. I should not waste my time." But the thought refused to leave her mind. The next day, during a council meeting, the discussion turned to the growing threat of the Drakthar. Reports had arrived of border colonies being attacked. The Drakthar were brutal warriors, large and reptilian, with fleets built for destruction. Even the proud Valorian navy had begun to struggle against them. The council argued fiercely about strategy, but then one old general spoke. "Perhaps the time has come to seek the humans," he said. The chamber fell silent. Liara's eyes narrowed, half in annoyance, half in amusement. "Not this again," she said sharply. "You too believe in those tales?" The general did not flinch. "I have fought many battles, princess. I have studied the archives of other empires. The humans are no myth. If even a fraction of the stories are true, they could turn the tide against the Drakthar." Liara laughed lightly, though inside she felt unsettled. "And where, General, do you expect us to find them? Do you think humans simply wait in the shadows for us to call?" The council chuckled uneasily, but the general's face stayed firm. "Legends survive for a reason, princess. One day you may understand." Liara ended the meeting quickly, dismissing the idea. Yet later, as she prepared to leave the council chamber, she overheard two officials whispering to each other. "They say the humans once destroyed an empire 10 times their size. They say they fight like predators from a death world. They say they cannot be broken." Liara walked past them with her chin raised, pretending not to care. But her heart beat faster. That evening she returned again to the archives. Alone this time. She stood before the broken holograms and listened to the fragments of ancient transmissions, One voice, though distorted, still carried through the centuries. "This is Captain Rourke of the Alliance Fleet. If you find this message, know that the humans did not fall quietly. We fought to the last. We always fight to the last." The word sent a chill through her. For the first time, Liara wondered if perhaps the legends were not so foolish after all. If humans truly existed once, what happened to them? Were they gone forever? Or had they simply chosen to vanish? She closed the archive and stepped out into the night, the twin moons shining down on the capital city. From the palace tower, the galaxy spread out before her. Billions of stars, countless worlds, endless mysteries. And somewhere among those stars, perhaps, was the truth about the humans. Liara clenched her fist, her pride telling her to dismiss the thought, yet her heart whispering that something waited beyond the reach of her empire. For now she told herself it was just a story, just a myth. But deep inside, Princess Liara had taken her first step toward a truth that would change not only her life but the fate of the entire galaxy. The Valorian Empire had known centuries of peace under its banners. Its fleet stretched across the stars like silver spears, and its colonies shone as jewels of culture and strength. Princess Liara had always believed her people were untouchable. But that belief began to crumble when the Drakthar came. The Drakthar were not like other rivals. They were not merchants fighting for trade routes, nor small clans seeking scraps of territory. They were predators, born for battle. Their ships were black iron beasts, bristling with weapons. Their warriors were massive, scales glinting like armor, and their hearts burned only for conquest. The first report seemed small: border colonies attacked, a few patrol ships destroyed. The council brushed it aside, claiming it was only another skirmish. But then whole fleets disappeared, messages cut off mid-sentence, outposts reduced to silence. Liara sat in the royal council chamber as one commander after another delivered grim news. "They strike without warning, Princess," one captain said, his voice tight with fear. "Their ships hide in nebulae, then fall upon our convoys like shadows. By the time reinforcements arrive, nothing remains." Liara tried to hold her pride. "We are Valorians. Our fleets have defeated every enemy before. The Drakthar will be no different." But her words felt hollow, even to herself. The council grew desperate. Some called for building larger warships. Others demanded alliances with weaker neighbors. Yet every ambassador returned with the same reply. No one dared to oppose the Drakthar. To stand with the Valorians was to invite destruction. The empire that once stood proud now began to feel the cold touch of fear. Liara, once shielded by luxury, now traveled to military outposts to see the war herself. She stood on bridges of starships as alarms rang, saw soldiers wounded and broken, and watched fires burn across the skies of once safe colonies. One evening, she visited a refugee camp on the world of Vera. Families huddled in makeshift shelters, their homes destroyed. A young Valorian child looked up at her with wide eyes and asked, "Princess, will the humans come to save us?" The question stunned her. "Humans?" she repeated softly. The child nodded. "The elders told us the stories. They said the humans were the bravest warriors in the galaxy. They never let anyone fall." Liara forced a small smile. "Those are only legends, child." But as she walked away, her heart was heavy. Even in despair, her people clung to those myths. Why did they believe so strongly? Days later, a fleet returned from a failed battle. Their flagship limped into orbit above Valor Prime, scarred and smoking. Liara went to greet the survivors. Among them was General Kalor, the same old soldier who had once urged her to believe in humans. He bowed weakly before her. "Princess, the Drakthar are unlike any foe we have faced. They adapt, they strike hard, and they never fear death. If we continue as we are, our empire will fall." Liara clenched her fists. "Then what do you suggest?" The general met her eyes. "The archives, Princess, they hold more than myths. If humans truly existed, they may yet endure somewhere in the galaxy. And if even a single warrior remains, that could be enough. Liara wanted to dismiss him. She wanted to say it was madness. But deep inside, she remembered the child's words, the whispers of her people, and the ancient voice in the archives declaring that humans always fought to the last. That night, she returned again to the Royal Archive. She searched deeper than before, past the broken fragments and half-ruined records. At last, she uncovered something new. An old data map buried in sealed files. It showed a forgotten sector on the edge of known space, a place untouched for centuries, marked only with a single word, Terran. Her heart beat faster. Could it be true? She summoned her closest advisors. "We will send an expedition," she declared, quietly. "If humans are only legend, we lose nothing. But if they are real..." She let the words hang in the air. Her advisors exchanged uncertain glances, but they did not refuse her. The Valorians were running out of choices. Within a week, a small fleet was prepared. Liara herself chose to lead it. She told the council it was a simple scouting mission, but in truth it was more than that. For the first time in her life, Princess Liara's fleet hovered silently above the barren planet. Below the surface was a rugged wasteland. Jagged cliffs, deep canyons, and scorched plains stretched as far as the eye could see. The sensors picked up faint energy readings, unusual patterns that did not match any known natural phenomena. Liara stood on the bridge of her flagship, eyes fixed on the holographic display. Her silver hair reflected the dim light, and for the first time she felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Could this world really hold the truth behind the human legends? "Princess," one officer spoke nervously, "our scans show life, but it is small in number, highly concentrated in that region." He pointed to a rough plateau, marked by strange structures that appeared both natural and artificial. Liara frowned. "Then we are not alone. Prepare a landing team. I want to see this for myself." The shuttle descended through the planet's thin atmosphere, bouncing slightly as it passed through pockets of turbulence. The rocky surface grew closer, and the scorched earth stretched out below. When the shuttle finally landed, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engines and the crunch of metal landing gear on stone. Liara stepped out, her boots sinking slightly into the ash-covered ground. Around her, her team scanned the area with energy detectors and weapons at the ready. Nothing moved at first, only the wind whistled across the barren canyons. Then a shadow appeared on the cliffs above, a figure standing tall, calm, and still. "Who goes there?" Liara called, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. The figure stepped forward into the light. Liara's breath caught. He was human, real, living, breathing, and exactly as the legends had described. His build was lean yet strong, his movements precise like a predator aware of every detail in his surroundings. His hair was dark, eyes piercing, and his uniform simple but functional, clearly made for survival, not display. "I am Marcus Hale," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You are far from home, Princess." Liara blinked. You are human?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, one of the last." He paused, scanning the landing team carefully. "And you are Valorians. I have heard of your kind. Proud, swift, and strong. But this world, this is mine now." Liara's pride rose immediately. She had expected myths, perhaps ruins, but not a living warrior who could stand so confidently on his own. "Then tell me, Marcus Hale," she said, keeping her tone formal. "Are the stories true? Were humans really as powerful as history claims?" Marcus smiled faintly, a mix of amusement and sadness. "Powerful? Perhaps. Terrifying? Definitely. But humans are not gods. We survive because we endure, because we fight smarter, not just harder." Before Liara could respond, sensors screamed. The cliffs above the landing zone trembled as Drakthar patrol ships appeared, their black silhouettes cutting through the sky. They had found the Valorian fleet. Liara's officers scrambled. "Princess, we are outnumbered. They will destroy us." Marcus didn't move. He simply raised a hand. "Stay behind me. Then, with speed that made Liara's eyes widen, he leapt onto the rocks, positioning himself between the Drakthar forces and the landing party. Using the terrain, he moved with precision, taking down several attacking drones with energy pulses and well-aimed shots. Liara watched in disbelief. The legends had been true, after all. This one human, this single man, was enough to hold off an attack that would have overwhelmed her fleet. The Drakthar ships faltered, confused by the sudden resistance. Marcus used the moment to guide Liara's landing team into a narrow canyon where the larger ships could not follow. He moved quickly, silently, yet each step was calculated and purposeful. Once the landing party reached safety, Liara finally found a moment to speak. How are you doing this alone?" Marcus looked at her, eyes calm. "I have trained for this my whole life. Humans do not rely on numbers or technology alone. We use our mind, our instincts, our will. We fight to survive, and survival makes us strong." Liara's respect for him grew. She had never met anyone like this. Not a Valorian soldier, not a general, not even her advisors. This man embodied the essence of human legends she had once dismissed as stories. After a tense moment, Marcus gestured to the cliffs. "There is a safe place ahead. Come, we can talk there. But first, you must trust me." Liara hesitated. Her pride whispered no, yet curiosity and desperation spoke louder. Finally, she nodded. "Lead the way." As they moved through the rocky canyons, Marcus explained the history of his people. Humans had once been scattered across the galaxy, small, colonies fighting larger empires and monsters beyond imagining. They survived often alone because they refused to surrender. The stories Liara had read were not exaggerations. They were lessons passed down through centuries. Liara listened, fascinated. She had always believed her people were the pinnacle of strength. Yet she realized how narrow her understanding had been. Humans had no vast fleets or massive empires, yet their influence had shaped history in ways the galaxy had long forgotten. By the time the landing party reached a hidden valley, Marcus had proven his skill multiple times. The Drakthar had been delayed, confused, and frustrated, yet Marcus remained unharmed. Liara now understood the truth. One human could change the outcome of battles. She turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Marcus Hale, I admit I was wrong. I thought humans were legends, stories made to scare children. But now I see. You are real. And more than that, you are extraordinary." Marcus nodded slightly. "Legends exist for a reason, Princess. And now it seems you're about to discover why." For the first time, Liara felt a mixture of awe and hope. The myths were alive, and standing before her was the proof she had long sought. The stars above the barren valley shone faintly, and for the first time in her life, Liara knew that meeting Marcus Hale was not the end of a story, but the beginning of one that could change the fate of her people, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The hidden valley where Marcus Hale had led Princess Liara's fleet was quiet, almost untouched by time. Jagged cliffs surrounded the space, and a small river wound through its center. It was a place of secrecy, perfect for planning and preparation. Liara stood on a flat rock overlooking the makeshift training area she had established. Around her, Valorian soldiers practiced their drills under the watchful eyes of Marcus. Their movements were precise, yet something was off. Marcus shook his head as he watched them. "You are strong, yes," he said, voice calm but firm. "But strength alone does not win battles. Humans fight differently. We adapt, we anticipate, we use the environment, observe, then act." The Valorians exchanged puzzled glances. They were used to strict formations, coordinated fleet maneuvers, and the raw power of numbers. Marcus was asking them to think differently, to rely on instinct as much as skill. Liara stepped forward. "Marcus, you cannot expect my soldiers to change overnight. They have trained for decades in Valorian ways." He turned to her, eyes piercing. "And yet if you want to survive the Drakthar, you must. Liara hesitated, but she knew he was right. The recent battles had shown her how unprepared even her proud army was for unpredictable enemies. If they did not adapt, they would fall. The first lesson Marcus taught was awareness. He led a small group through the rocky terrain, showing them how to move silently, how to spot dangers before they struck, and how to use the land to their advantage. Soldiers who had once relied only on weapons now learned to watch, to listen, and to anticipate. Liara joined him during the training. At first she struggled. Her Valorian reflexes were fast, but her movements were rigid, bound by centuries of formal training. Marcus corrected her gently but firmly. "Do not move like a soldier," he said. "Move like you are part of the land. Let your instincts guide you. Feel, do not think." Hours passed. Liara stumbled, fell, and became frustrated. But Marcus did not show impatience. Slowly she began to understand. Her body responded differently, more fluidly, more freely. Each movement became purposeful rather than programmed. Meanwhile, Marcus trained the soldiers in small squads, teaching them ambush tactics, rapid retreats, and the importance of improvisation. Valorian squads that had once fought in tight formations now learned to split, regroup, and strike unpredictably. Marcus emphasized that humans were never the strongest physically, but their minds, strategy, and endurance made them formidable. As the days passed, Liara noticed something remarkable. Her soldiers were improving faster than she expected. They were learning to think for themselves, to adapt on the fly, and to anticipate their enemies' actions. Marcus was not just teaching techniques, he was teaching a philosophy of survival. During one evening after a long day of training, Liara and Marcus sat on a cliff overlooking the valley. The twin moons cast a silver light across the jagged terrain, and the river below reflected the glow like a ribbon of liquid light. "Why do humans fight like this?" Liara asked quietly. "Why not just rely on strength or weapons?" Marcus looked at her, eyes thoughtful. "Humans are survivors, Princess. We have faced enemies stronger, faster, and more numerous than ourselves. If we only relied on strength, we would not exist today. We fight smart. We fight for life, for freedom. That is our legacy." Liara remained silent, absorbing his words. For the first time, she felt the weight of human history, the reason legends spoke of their warriors with awe. These were not just stories, they were lessons carved into the memory of the galaxy. The next day, the Valorian fleet floated silently in the void above their homeworld. Thousands of ships, each bristling with weapons, gleamed in the starlight. But even with such strength, the faces of the commanders were tense. The Drakthar were coming, and this time, they would not hold back. Princess Liara stood on the bridge of her flagship, silver hair flowing with the recycled air currents. Beside her, Marcus Hale observed the fleet calmly. He had spent weeks training the Valorian soldiers, teaching them human tactics, ambushes, improvisation, and thinking beyond strict formations. Today, all of that would be put to the test. "Princess," Marcus said quietly, "remember what I taught. Strength alone will not win this battle. Use the terrain of space, anticipate their moves, and trust your instincts." Liara nodded. Her pride had shifted. She no longer doubted humans or their ways. Now she understood that intelligence, adaptability, and endurance could shape the outcome of war even against overwhelming odds. The Drakthar fleet appeared first as tiny silhouettes on the sensors, then as a massive, terrifying formation. Their ships were enormous, dark, and bristling with weapons. The Valorians had been outnumbered before, but nothing like this. Liara's stomach tightened, yet she remained composed. "Form defensive lines," she commanded. "But remember, Marcus's strategy, flexibility, not rigidity." The battle began with a thunderous roar of energy beams and shields. The Drakthar struck like a tidal wave, smashing through the Valorian outer defense ships. But Marcus's teachings guided the Valorians. They split into unpredictable squads, vanished into asteroid belts, and reappeared where the Drakthar least expected. Liara watched in awe as the human strategies unfolded. One squad set traps, drawing a portion of the enemy fleet into a narrow canyon of space between two planets. When the Drakthar pursued, hidden Vailorian ships fired from concealed positions, taking them by surprise. The Drakthar faltered, their confidence shaken. Marcus led a strike team personally, his movements swift and precise. He boarded a small enemy vessel, disabling its engines and communications in moments. Liara saw him coordinate his team without words, signals only they understood. This was human brilliance in action, calculated, fearless, and decisive. The Drakthar flagship loomed, massive and menacing, directing the battle with relentless precision. The Vailorian fleet struggled under its fire, but Marcus had prepared. For this, Liara followed his advice, maneuvering the fleet into a position that gave them cover while cutting off the flagship's escape routes. "Now," Marcus shouted, signaling the strike team. They launched in perfect coordination. Missiles struck, energy beams surged, and the flagship shuddered under the unexpected assault. The Drakthar, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with raw power, were confused by the Vailorians' new tactics. Liara felt a surge of hope. Her people were fighting differently now. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and driven not only by pride but by the will to survive. Every maneuver Marcus had taught was making a difference. Despite the chaos, the battle was brutal. Vailorian ships fell, and Marcus' strike team faced heavy resistance. Yet each loss only strengthened the resolve of the remaining soldiers. They pressed forward with precision, forcing the Drakthar into positions they could not anticipate. Liara, herself engaged in strategic command, directing her fleet from the bridge. She coordinated ambush points, cut off reinforcements, and ensured that no squad was isolated. Marcus guided her, whispering advice, and reminding her to think like a human, not only a Vailorian commander. Finally, the moment arrived. Marcus and a small team boarded the Drakthar flagship. They fought their way to the command core, facing elite guards who had never been challenged like this. Marcus moved with a fluid grace, each action deliberate and deadly. The human's legendary combat skills proved true. He and his team disabled the flagship, leaving the rest of the Drakthar fleet in disarray. The Drakthar retreated, their morale broken. What they had expected to be an easy victory had turned into a disastrous defeat. The Vailorian fleet pressed the advantage, reclaiming lost territory and rescuing colonies that had been under siege. On the bridge of her flagship, Liara exhaled deeply. Her fleet had survived, and they had done so not only because of their strength but because they had learned to fight differently. Humans were no myth. One human warrior had changed the tide of battle, and the lessons he shared had reshaped the entire Vailorian military. Marcus approached her, slightly bruised but unbowed. "The battle is won, Princess," he said quietly. "But remember, this is only the beginning. The Drakthar will return, and the galaxy will never be the same after today." Liara nodded. She looked out over the fleet, feeling pride unlike anything she had known before. Her people had learned to fight smarter, faster, and with more courage than she had thought possible. But more than that, she had seen the truth of human legends firsthand. Marcus Hale was living proof that humans could endure, adapt, and inspire, even the proudest empire in the galaxy. That night, as the twin moons of Vailor Prime reflected on the repaired fleet, Liara walked to the balcony of her flagship. She watched the stars and thought of the humans who had once walked the galaxy, leaving their mark on history. Now, for the first time, she understood why stories of humans had endured for centuries. Marcus stood beside her silently. "You see now, Princess," he said softly. "Humans survive not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to give up. We endure, and we fight with everything we have, no matter the odds." Liara nodded, her heart full of respect. "I see now, Marcus, and my people. We will never forget it. The human legacy. It will live on through the Vailorians." He smiled faintly, not out of pride, but understanding. "That is all we ask. That the spirit of humans, the way we endure, is remembered. That it inspires those who come after us to fight with courage no matter the challenge." Above them, the stars shone quietly, witnessing the birth of a new chapter. The Valorian Empire had survived, the Drakthar had been defeated, and the human legacy had proven itself real. For Princess Liara, the legend of humans was no longer a story to scoff at. It was a reality she had seen with her own eyes, and one that would shape the future of her people and the galaxy. The Drakthar fleet had been driven back, their ships scattered like fallen shadows across the void. The Valorian Empire had survived, but the victory came at a cost. Many ships were damaged and even more soldiers were injured. Yet amid the wreckage and scars of battle, there was a feeling that had never been known before. Hope. Princess Liara walked among the soldiers in the Aun central hangar of her flagship. She saw men and women tending to the wounded, repairing ships and helping each other without hesitation. Their movements were precise, confident, and resilient. It was a transformation she had witnessed firsthand, guided by Marcus Hale's teachings. Marcus stood nearby, observing silently. Though his clothes were scorched and his body bore bruises from the battle, he seemed calm, almost serene. Liara approached him, her silver cloak brushing against the floor. "You did it," she said softly, though she did not sound surprised. "The legends, they were true." Marcus shook his head. "Not just the legends, Princess. You and your people made them real again. The humans showed the way, but the Valorians did the fighting. You survived because you learned to endure, to adapt. That is the human legacy." Liara looked out through the massive observation window at the fleet. Below, ships were being repaired and small teams of soldiers practiced new maneuvers, testing the tactics Marcus had taught. She realized how much her people had changed. The Valorians were proud and strong, yes, but now they were also wise and adaptable, capable of facing enemies no one had imagined. "Marcus," she said, turning to him, "I once laughed at humans. I dismissed the stories as myths. But now I understand. Humans are more than warriors. They are survivors. They endure when everything else fails." Marcus smiled faintly. "Exactly. Humans fight not for glory, not for conquest, but because we refuse to give up. That is what makes us formidable. That is why your people survived this battle." Liara nodded. She had seen it for herself. One human warrior had taught an entire empire to fight differently, to think differently, and to see the battlefield in a way they never had before. Humans were not just stories. They were a force that had shaped history, a legacy that endured even when empires rose and fell. The following day, Liara stood on the balcony of her flagship, overlooking the capital world of Valor Prime. The sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the repaired fleets and cities. Her people gathered below, celebrating victory, tending to the wounded, and honoring those who had fallen. She raised her voice, commanding the attention of all who could hear. "People of Valoria, today we have survived not by our power alone, but by learning from the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known. Humans are not myths as we once believed. They are real, and their legacy has shown us the way." The crowd fell silent for a moment, stunned by the declaration. Then a cheer rose loud and proud, echoing across the city and into the heavens. Soldiers saluted, civilians clapped, and the spirit of the Valorians was renewed. Liara turned to Marcus, who had remained behind her. "You could have taken glory for yourself," she said, "but you did not. You helped us because it was needed, not for power or reward." Marcus shook